Keir Starmer has denied breaking lockdown rules after his voice coach appears to have travelled more than 50 miles between lockdown tiers to meet him.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key word?
And that was Keir Starmer dodging questions last night in Brussels. Are you convinced? Well, just a few days before Keir Starmer met with his voice coach, he was calling for harder, tougher, stricter lockdown measures.
Easing the restrictions, I think, is going to be the next big mistake for the Prime Minister. And he, rather than sort of saying, well, I'm not going to change the rules, it's over to you, families and communities, you take responsibility. That's not the act of a Prime Minister. The Prime Minister should say, I'll take the difficult decisions, not hand them over to individuals. We can see that the tiered system isn't working in the way the Prime Minister promised. More people are going into the higher tiers, so it's not strong enough.
Now, that does not sound like a man that's very happy to have an actress around to polish his vocal cords in an evening, does it? And let's not forget that Keir Starmer spent months and months hounding Boris Johnson to resign.
Game is up. You cannot be a lawmaker and a lawbreaker. And it's time to pack his bags. Only then can the government function again. Only then can the rot be carved out. Only then can we restore the dignity of that great office and the democracy that it represents.
Yeah, it's always time to give other people the boot, and it's always time for inquiries into the wrongdoing of others, because the plot thickens. Look at this. His voice coach, Leonie Mellinger, put out a tweet in 2020, in June, calling for Dominic Cummings to be investigated for his eye test trip to Durham. There we go, two-tier rules there. And of course, Cummings wasn't the only one to take a trip to Durham. Because yes, Keir Starmer and his deputy, Angela Rayner, were spotted having a cheeky bevy and a curry there, a lager-fueled Labour lash-up, although they were cleared of breaking lockdown rules again. But the investigation into that takeaway earned the Prime Minister this glorious nickname.
Sabir Korma, Mr. Speaker, is currently failing to hold himself to the same high standards that he demanded of me.
Now, once again today, Sir Keir Starmer insists once again that no rules were broken. But is it starting to feel that no matter what the indiscretion, different rules seem to apply to the man his critics call two-tier Keir Starmer? Now, let's get the latest now with GB News political editor Chris Hope, who joins me in the studio. Chris, there is a feeling, is there not, that whatever the indiscretion, go back in the mists of time, the rules are never broken when it's Sir Keir Starmer. How can it be the case that a key worker, a voice coach, travelled from a strict Tier 3 into Tier 4 London, gave Sir Keir Starmer a vocal lesson? Don't know if he wants his money back on that one. And yet still no rules were broken. This is precisely the kind of thing that the Labour Party would have hounded Boris Johnson out of office for. Is there a continual feeling that different rules apply to the man I'm starting to call non-stick Starmer?
Martin, I mean, the answer is no. I mean, the number 10 are very clear. The rules were followed. No question, you are correct in what you say there, that Sir Keir Starmer would be pressuring the Prime Minister about this were the roles reversed. But as far as number 10 is concerned, the rules were followed. The rules then, let's go back to December the 24th, 2020. The Boris Johnson Brexit deal had just been announced. You know, it's very important, I think, that the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, spoke and gave Labour's view on that deal. Leonie Mellinger had been working with Sir Keir Starmer from 2017 to 2021 through lockdown. She had key worker status, we are told, by the Labour Party.
Why?
Let's finish what we know. She then travelled to give Sir Keir Starmer some advice on preparation for that speech he gave on that day, a short statement, a televised press conference on December the 24th. We are told she was helping with speech preparation. She's preparing Sir Keir Starmer for a speech that day. That is for them, that is a key worker status issue. So she may not have been on the staff of the Labour Party, but she was being treated as a key worker and had been since 2017.
Why can't you do it via Zoom? everybody else in the country.
These are questions which we are seeking answers from the airline manager. Why not do it by Zoom? Others did. Labour may have felt that only in person would that have worked. I mean, there's no question that the rules were as they are then, and there's no question also that Labour would have been pursuing the Tories exactly as hard as the Tories are pursuing Labour on this.
And I think that's the precise point. There is absolutely a feeling that the rules don't apply. I mean, don't forget, this was for breaking tier rules. I mean, you couldn't make it up. This is two-tier Keir breaking tier rules before it was called two-tier Keir.
But you said that nothing ever sticks. To be fair to them, the police did investigate previously on the Durham beer curry event. No charges were brought forward. No problem there. So, to be fair to Keir Starmer, he has been investigated. He did say, I would resign if found guilty of wrongdoing. He wasn't found guilty of wrongdoing at all. So the police looked at that. They haven't looked at this because the Labour Party say no problem here.
But Keir Starmer, a couple of weeks ago, didn't call for a national inquiry into rape gangs, did call for a national inquiry into Dominic Cummings' eye test. He called for a national inquiry into Boris Johnson's wallpaper. The point I'm trying to make is, it seems to me that Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party get on their high horse, and isn't that the point? They seem to live by this higher moral standard. When they're caught with their fingers in the till, no rules are broken, I wonder if people are starting to not buy this anymore.
There's a risk of being hoisted by your own petard, no question, if they are found guilty of wrongdoing. I do wonder whether the Conservatives may feel they want to question the Prime Minister at the dispatch box and get him to state what happened at the dispatch box, as Boris Johnson did. Because the reason why Boris Johnson was forced out and lost the confidence of his own team, well, the final reason was because of he made those remarks that triggered that inquiry into what he said in the House of Commons. Did he mislead the Commons? So, there may be get Sir Keir Starmer on the record about this, and then we'll hear, as things stand, we have him on the record yesterday. Of course not, didn't breach the rules, and all rules were followed. But as things stand, Labour say there's nothing wrong here.
OK, well, they would do. Stick with us, Chris Hope, because I'm now joined by the shadow Paymaster General, Richard Holden. Richard is not remotely happy about this. In fact, you wrote a stinging letter to Downing Street yesterday on this, Richard Holden. And I just want to ask you the same question. A lot of people today are asking, Sir Keir Starmer was on his high horse about any moral indiscretion during lockdowns, over freebies, over donations with the Conservative Party. And once again, no rules are broken.
No, well, he's stuck between the tiers here, is Keir, because obviously there's this level 3 versus level 4, and we know that there is illegal to travel between those areas during lockdown. And Starmer was one of those people who was vociferously trying to pursue everybody for anything. And he also said there should be no statute of limitations on COVID related issues as well, which I think is going to be quite sticky for him the more we see from this, because the more that is revealed, the deeper he seems to be in it. And I cannot understand, Martin, how on earth anybody could classify a voice coach, an actress, or somebody teaching you acting as a key worker, when any form of student doing an acting course or anything like that themselves would not be actually at university at that time in those tier areas. It just seems to me that it's one rule for him, one rule for the Labour Party, and another rule for everybody else right across the country when it comes to this. And it's only now that this has been come out. They've never been clear about it, never been upfront about it. Yet it was very clear at the time that on the 24th of December 2020, that there's tier 3 in Brighton and Hove area, tier 4 in London. And it looks from all the evidence we're now seeing from social media from the time that people were travelling between those areas.
You're absolutely right to point out the list of key workers. I've got a list here. Doctors, nurses, teachers, social workers, those in the justice system, those who work in religious areas, national and local government workers, those in food production, public service workers such as police, armed forces, firefighters. There's no vocal coaches on this. Do they think we're ridiculous or what?
Well, quite. My mum was working as a ward clerk in a community hospital where people had COVID during the pandemic, and she was a key worker. If somebody had told me that actresses and voice coaches were key workers, I would have found that laughable at the time. I'm sure Keir Starmer would have found it laughable at the time. Yet now this is what they're relying on for their defence. it seems to me this story's got a long way to run, and there are some really serious answers for Keir Starmer. You could see, Martin, just how uncomfortable he was in Brussels yesterday, trying to sideswipe those questions from journalists. I think from Jack Elsom at The Sun, who's been quite a bit on this, there are really serious questions to be answered here, because Keir, as you say, he seems to have been a bit Teflon. Whatever seems to stick to others doesn't seem to stick to him. Well, I think it's about time that the Prime Minister calls for an investigation, just like he called for an investigation into Boris Johnson, who, by Sue Gray. Now, maybe Sue Gray would be quite interested in doing this inquiry after he gave her the order of the boot himself not that long ago.
OK, Richard Holden, I'm joined in the studio by Chris Hope. He's got a question for you.
Richard, viewers and listeners might be thinking cynically that were the roles reversed, then you'd be saying, look, nothing to see here, Boris Johnson's innocent, move on Labour. Aren't you just doing what you have to do as the opposition in giving the government a kicking? And isn't it basically time to move on from tears and lockdown rows? I mean, isn't it time just to give this government a chance, Richard?
Well, look, I think, Chris, one could argue that if it wasn't Keir Starmer himself who had said there should be no statute of limitations on this, that was his argument at the time. If he hadn't himself lifted to such a high pedestal on which he was then casting judgment on everybody else, I think the real question here is about his hypocrisy around the Labour Party at the time, who weaponised this as much as practically possible against Boris Johnson and against Rishi Sunak. And we all remember, Boris was in the presence of a cake, and Rishi turned up early for a meeting. Well, it's quite. I think with those, if people were being fined on that basis, then ensuring that your voice coach was shifted 50 miles across tiers to come and help you out. I think there's going to be big questions asked here. That's why I've written to the Prime Minister, and I'm yet to get a response.
OK, maybe he's busy having his vocal cords polished. Richard Holden, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always an absolute pleasure. Well, join me now for a counterpoint is the Labour activist Chris Worrell. Chris, welcome to the show. A lot of people here are saying this is just a matter of hypocrisy. If it's good enough for the goose, it's good enough for the gander, but it doesn't seem to be good enough for non-stick Starmer.
Well, look, there we go again, a load of old cobblers from the lot who backed Boris for actual law breaking, and now they want to clutch their pearls over Keir Starmer hiring a voice coach. I mean, give over. I mean, let's get this straight. Like, while the Tories were having lockdown raves, Keir Starmer was polishing up on his public speaking. I mean, that sounds like proper villainous behaviour to me. I mean, if that's their smoking gun, then they're in worse shape than we thought.
But Chris, are you seriously saying that to the list of doctors, nurses, key workers, food production, those in the army, we can add vocal choir practice? I mean, what planet are you on? A vocal helper is not a key worker by any stretch of the imagination, no matter what side of the political spectrum you sit on.
Well, we've seen that no rules were breaking, and let's get this straight. I mean, it's not about the rules, is it? It's about desperation, and they've got nothing real on him. So they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. And meanwhile, those guys are putting actual COVID lockdown breakers in the Lords. You've got Lord Bailey there. I mean, Nick Candy, are we going to bang him up too from the new Treasury reform? He was partying. I mean, let's be honest, having public speaking before you as a leader of the opposition, it's hardly committing a crime, innit? And that's what the police have found. Nothing to worry about there.
So you don't think there's any indiscretion? You don't think that from Sabir Korma having that lockdown lash up, you don't think that having someone round to help you with your vocal cords, and by the way, you might want to get a refund on that, it sounds exactly the same. You don't think there's anything to see here? Just move on.
Well, let's think about what was actually happening during those times. I mean, the Tories were stuffing their mates' pockets full of cash with dodgy contracts. You've got all these other stuff lying for their teeth, treating the public like mugs. And at the end of the day, is this going to be the scandal of the century? I don't behave, mate. It ain't. The kid's not going to go anywhere at the end of the day, and the public aren't going to fall for the nonsense. If the Tories want to talk about resignations, maybe they should look at their own benches.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there. It just seems to me it's just different tiers for Keirs. He was 2-tier Keir, tier 3, tier 4, more tiers than tiny tiers. We've got to leave it there. Chris Worrell, always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much to have you